Part 2, Chapter 15 of 800 Leagues on the Amazon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 800 Leagues on the Amazon by Jules Verne. Part 2, The Cryptogram. Chapter 15, The Last Efforts. The magistrate, however, was not the only one who passed his time unprofitably. Benito, Manuel, and Minha tried all they could together to extract the secret from the document on which depended their father's life and honor. On his part, Fragoso, aided by Lina, could not remain quiet, but all their ingenuity had failed, and the numbers still escaped them. "Why don't you find it, Fragoso?" asked the young mulatto. "I will find it," answered Fragoso. And he did not find it. Here we should say that Fragoso had an idea of a project of which he had not even spoken to Lina, but which had taken full possession of his mind. This was, to go in search of the gang to which the ex-captain of the woods had belonged, and to find out who was the probable author of this cipher document, which was supposed to be the confession of the culprit of Tijuco. The part of the Amazon where these people were employed, the very place where Fragoso had met Torres a few years before, was not very far from Manaos. He would only have to descend the river for about 50 miles to the mouth of the Madeira, a tributary coming in on the right, and there he was almost sure to meet the head of these Capitas de Mato, to which Torres belonged. In 2 days, or 3 days at the outside, Fragoso could get into communication with the old comrades of the adventurer. "Yes, I could do that," he repeated to himself, "but what would be the good of it, supposing I succeeded? If we are sure that one of Torres's companions has recently died, would that prove him to be the author of this crime? Would that show that he gave Torres a document in which he announced himself the author of this crime, and exonerated Joam Dacosta? Would that give us the key of the document? No! 2 men only knew the cipher, the culprit and Torres, and these 2 men are no more." So reasoned Fragoso. It was evident that his enterprise would do no good. But the thought of it was too much for him. An irresistible influence impelled him to set out, although he was not even sure of finding the band on the Madeira. In fact, it might be engaged in some other part of the province, and to come up with it might require more time than Fragoso had at his disposal. And what would be the result? It is none the less true, however, that on the 29th of August, before sunrise, Fragoso, without saying anything to anybody, secretly left the jangada, arrived at Manaos, and embarked in one of the egarritas which daily descend the Amazon. And great was the astonishment when he was not seen on board, and did not appear during the day. No one, not even Lina, could explain the absence of so devoted a servant at such a crisis. Some of them even asked, and not without reason, if the poor fellow, rendered desperate at having, when he met him on the frontier, personally contributed to bringing Torres on board the raft, had not made away with himself. But if Fragoso could so reproach himself, how about Benito? In the first place, at Iquitos he had invited Torres to visit the fazenda; in the second place he had brought him on board the jangada to become a passenger on it; and in the third place, in killing him, he had annihilated the only witness whose evidence could save the condemned man. And so Benito considered himself responsible for everything, the arrest of his father, and the terrible events of which it had been the consequence. In fact, had Torres been alive, Benito could not tell but that, in some way or another, from pity or for reward, he would have finished by handing over the document. Would not Torres, whom nothing could compromise, have been persuaded to speak, had money been brought to bear upon him? Would not the long sought for proof have been furnished to the judge? Yes, undoubtedly, and the only man who could have furnished this evidence had been killed through Benito. Such was what the wretched man continually repeated to his mother, to Manuel, and to himself. Such were the cruel responsibilities which his conscience laid to his charge. Between her husband, with whom she passed all the time that was allowed her, and her son, a prey to despair which made her tremble for his reason, the brave Yaquita lost none of her moral energy. In her they found the valiant daughter of Magalhaës, the worthy wife of the fazender of Iquitos. The attitude of Joam Dacosta was well adapted to sustain her in this ordeal. That gallant man, that rigid Puritan, that austere worker, whose whole life had been a battle, had not yet shown a moment of weakness. The most terrible blow which had struck him without prostrating him had been the death of Judge Ribeiro, in whose mind his innocence did not admit of a doubt. Was it not with the help of his old defender that he had hoped to strive for his rehabilitation? The intervention of Torres he had regarded throughout as being quite secondary for him. And of this document he had no knowledge when he left Iquitos to hand himself over to the justice of his country. He only took with him moral proofs. When a material proof was unexpectedly produced in the course of the affair, before or after his arrest, he was certainly not the man to despise it. But if, on account of regrettable circumstances, the proof disappeared, he would find himself once more in the same position as when he passed the Brazilian frontier. The position of a man who came to say, "Here is my past life, here is my present, here is an entirely honest existence of work and devotion which I bring you. You passed on me at first an erroneous judgment. After 23 years of exile I have come to give myself up. Here I am, judge me again." The death of Torres, the impossibility of reading the document found on him, had thus not produced on Joam Dacosta the impression which it had on his children, his friends, his household, and all who were interested in him. "I have faith in my innocence," he repeated to Yaquita, "as I have faith in God. If my life is still useful to my people, and a miracle is necessary to save me, that miracle will be performed. If not, I shall die. God alone is my judge." The excitement increased at Manaos as the time ran on. The affair was discussed with unexampled acerbity. In the midst of this enthralment of public opinion, which evoked so much of the mysterious, the document was the principal object of conversation. At the end of this fourth day not a single person doubted but that it had contained the vindication of the doomed man. Every one had been given an opportunity of deciphering its incomprehensible contents, for the Diario do Grande Para had reproduced it in facsimile. Autograph copies were spread about in great numbers at the suggestion of Manuel, who neglected nothing that might lead to the penetration of the mystery, not even chance, that nickname of Providence, as someone has called it. In addition, a reward of 100 contos, or 300,000 francs, was promised to any one who could discover the ciphers so fruitlessly sought after, and read the document. This was quite a fortune, and so people of all classes forgot to eat, drink, or sleep to attack this unintelligible cryptogram. Up to the present, however, all had been useless, and probably the most ingenious analysts in the world would have spent their time in vain. It had been advertised that any solution should be sent, without delay, to Judge Jaraquez, to his house in God the Sun Street, but the evening of the 29th of August came and none had arrived, nor was any likely to arrive. Of all those who took up the study of the puzzle, Judge Jaraquez was one of the most to be pitied. By a natural association of ideas, he also joined in the general opinion that the document referred to the affair at Tijuco, and that it had been written by the hand of the guilty man, and exonerated Joam Dacosta. And so he put even more ardour into his search for the key. It was not only the art for art's sake which guided him, it was a sentiment of justice, of pity toward a man suffering under an unjust condemnation. If it is the fact that a certain quantity of phosphorus is expended in the work of the brain, it would be difficult to say how many milligrams the judge had parted with to excite the network of his sensorium, and after all, to find out nothing, absolutely nothing. But Jaraquez had no idea of abandoning the inquiry. If he could only now trust to chance, he would work on for that chance. He tried to evoke it by all means possible and impossible. He had given himself over to fury and anger, and what was